Okay. I'm your host, Cam. I might need to get some brain surgery. And with me tonight is none other than Presidents Kevin and Ryan Johnson from the Almost Presidents podcast.
Yeah, we're almost presidents, not presidents. So
you should be president.
Make sure you get that one right.
Hey, but you don't want to sell your soul, so I can't blame you. You know.
Look, I'll take an endorsement within the first 30 seconds of the pod. That's a good sign.
A contribution from only. It's a confidential agreement. Oh, so here we are tonight. We thought we'd talk about all versions of the movie JFK.
Yeah.
Yes, there's more than two versions. Maybe free if you count the History Channel version, but
yeah, I'm sure there's versions I don't even know about.
They wanted just a movie sit down, and I'm willing to give it to them because this was a cool topic they suggested. After much communication and technology failing us, here we are finally. And so just circling around, Kevin, are you already kind of generally into kind of social commentary? I mean, you obviously are because you already have a political podcast, but I mean, just what draws you to Oliver Stone, if anything, in his movies?
Well, I think what just drove me to Oliver Stone is it was kind of just on topic with like our podcast. Like, I mean, you saw in the film, or anybody who's watched the film, there's scenes showing Bobby Kennedy getting assassinated, which is obviously what we talked about on our last season of our podcast. That was kind of like a big focus point for us. Bobby Kennedy's what we would call an almost president, a failed presidential campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I've generally always kind of liked the little like conspiracy theory type stuff. I think it's always like kind of fun. I'm still not sure what I'd make of the film overall and whether I buy the
it's true
the idea that it was like an inside job with the CIA. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll get into like what my thoughts are on that, but that's generally kind of like what brought it to me.
It kind of did seem like for a while like it was how can I say, it was bizarre. It's like it kind of opened up some discussion, but I mean, for instance, my grandmother never wanted to watch it. She was one of those, you just don't touch the subject of JFK. What a great man. And so I found that interesting. So as a contrast, like for instance, there was this one Forrest Whitaker, Johnny Depp movie that posed different. It was often called the JFK, but if you focused on Tupac, and I found that was interesting because then that movie got a lot of flack because it didn't seem like it really had anything going on. Well, this one does open up like different perspectives, and while it doesn't go with any of the visions, it kind of still makes that clear at the start that they're kind of venting. They're just going through different elements, even though there are a bunch of outdated inaccuracies. It's just interesting to just kind of opened it up. But like you say, if you did it now, it might backfire.
Yeah.
And I think he found an interesting anchor point, too, in this whole Jim Garrison story. I didn't know about this guy, and I didn't know just how far he took the investigation. So, I mean, I think asking what you think of Oliver Stone as a first question is a really good question, because Oliver Stone, I think, is one of those directors where you have to think about his movie from the perspective of, okay, I'm watching an Oliver Stone movie. And the perspective of, okay, what's this movie about? Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
But this one is especially interesting because Oliver Stone's a Vietnam vet who's seen action. Yeah. So you watch Platoon, and that really feels like a guy who made a movie who experienced this for himself. And then his movie about JFK, who he seems to have a reverence for, who he seems to think completely intended on getting people out of Vietnam. And then, of course, that's where things went wrong for him. Among other things, I mean, people forget just how many people the Kennedys pissed off. There was a long list.
Oh, yeah. And they're not just mobsters. There's all other sorts of like, yeah, this person probably had it in for him, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that, to be honest, I'm really not so sure about is, and Ryan, you might be able to speak to this a little bit as well. I don't really think it's true that JFK was like on the verge of like pulling everybody out of Vietnam. Like, I think that Eisenhower and Kennedy both had a little bit of skepticism about how important that mission was. But I think they kind of both got like dragged along by the situation, and they both kind of fundamentally believed that we needed to preserve Vietnam but they just didn't think we should spend a ton of like troops and energy on it.
I felt the same
LBJ
way,
obviously like
yeah.
super believed in it, you know, and threw everything that he could at it. But like, I don't think Kennedy was really on the verge of like totally evacuating Vietnam. That's a little dubious to me, but
Yeah.
maybe you could speak to that too, Ryan. I don't know.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Yeah, I mean, I think you said it. I definitely don't think he would have been sitting at lunch with his advisor, like LBJ, planning where they were going to do the next, napalm,
Mhm.
flyby or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it did. I mean, that's so much with the Kennedys. Like, we just don't know. But I certainly don't think he would have escalated the conflict as much as LBJ. But at the same time, I don't know. I might have to look into history a little bit more, but I don't see him as diametrically opposed to the military-industrial complex as they kind of made him out to be in the movie, or at least Jim Garrison's idea of him and Oliver Stone's idea of him.
That's a very good point, because it does make a lot of I don't know if I call it assumptions so much as it takes a lot of stuff that you really do have to kind of just wonder, is that a statement of fact or is that just an observation?
I will say though that it made me approach conspiracy theories a little bit differently, because
Hmm.
when you aren't, a believer in a ton of conspiracy theories, you kind of just think of those people as off, believing some crazy crap like the moon landing is fake, all the JFK conspiracies, whatever, the Earth is flat, whatever conspiracy theory you want, and that it's this leap. But I think this movie showed that buying into conspiracy theories can actually be a series of small steps, and each step seems like it logically leads to the next until you finally get to the point where it's like, okay, of course JFK rounded that corner. They triangulated the fire. There was 3 teams of shooters. Of course there was. Of course they hired this person, and of course Oswald wasn't who he said he was, and of course all this stuff is true because step by step by step by step. And I really got that when he was talking to that red-haired guy who was pretty high up in government. I was
Hmm.
like, okay, so this is how conspiracy theories work. Like, this is how you get from A to Z. It's not A to B, it's A to Z. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I mean, we already have some delightful actors, playing the various suspects, Kevin Bacon, Gary Oldman, as uh, Oswald, and then like, but at the same time, it doesn't really necessarily do any good. I don't think it just kind of is. Again, it's venting. It's just kind of displaying a bunch of connected events. I mean, in hindsight, I mean, when William Friedkin does kind of like, for instance, like violent crime thrillers with a bunch of passion and political discussion behind him, he kind of doesn't necessarily have an end in sight. He kind of just throws it out there and says that's the movie. Spike Lee will, you know, kind of conjure up an event and then makes, once he sees that you're actually paying attention, then he makes a giant statement. And it seems like Stone is kind of in between that, but sometimes he doesn't really go all the way to where you're just like, so really, what was the point? It definitely makes you wonder about how this contrasts with, Nixon and W, because it's like, but in hindsight, it seems like, Nixon is kind of a like it or hate it take on, a rather hated president. And then, W kind of just humanizes George W, but kind of also doesn't really seem to have much to say compared to this movie, which seems to want to actually say a lot of things about the different uh, criminal conspiracy, but ultimately it doesn't really try to solve it either, if that makes sense, I guess.
No, I mean, I haven't seen Nixon or the George W. Bush movie. Although I
Mhm.
did see the one that they did about what was it, where Christian Bale put on all that weight to play Dick Cheney. That movie
Oh yeah,
was
Vice. Yeah, that was a
very
fun set.
interesting. I'm not sure what to make of that, but
No, it's a good
Yeah,
question, and it kind of makes you wonder who goes far enough versus who kind of holds back a bit after making a giant statement.
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
So
I sorry.
no, I was about to take it in a different direction. So if you have something to say, definitely go ahead.
No, I mean, I thought that Oliver Stone went really far with this. I don't know if that puts me at odds with you a little bit. Like, I think that he was trying to expose all avenues that he could with this, and I really thought that he did that effectively by. I mean, I think it was also a device when somebody be talking for 20, 30, sometimes 40 minutes straight about all these different things.
Yeah.
He would show in black and white it going down, whatever was being described. And I think that that was a good device to kind of break up the long dialogue, but it also was like, oh, could that have happened? Could this have happened? Could that have happened? And I really took it as like the tone of it really felt like he was pissed off. He wanted to look under every rock, and he thought that there were still a lot of things being hidden. And I think in reaction to the film, I should have done a little more research before going on, but there was a response from the government, right? In
Yeah,
the wake of the film.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
did they release something or other that had been previously unreleased about JFK? I don't know. I mean,
It's
but
kind
it
of
was
like
a
that.
weird
Yeah.
assassination. It's a very weird assassination. I mean, there's a lot of odd things. A lot of people said they saw things. Um, I mean, it really, the whole magic bullet theory. It really is bizarre. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I. Well, I know that I didn't completely follow, every rabbit hole and think, yep, that's it. But I did leave it thinking that there's definitely more to this than just this lone gunman. Simple as that. Shut up. you know, I don't know if I
Yeah.
believe it comes from our own government. I believe that LBJ is an incredibly ambitious politician, one of the most ambitious in American history. But I don't know if he's capable of being involved in that. But I think there is definitely more to it. The
So that was
assassination.
kind of one thing I wanted to hear maybe some of your guys' take on it is like moving a little bit away from like the film itself. Like what do you guys think about the theory, right? Like do you buy like one shooter? Do you buy all the way into Oliver Stone's idea of like this was a secret like government conspiracy, or are you kind of somewhere in the middle? I'm kind of interested to hear what you guys think.
Thank you for bringing up that uh, very key question. Yeah, I think growing up, I was open to the possibility of a secondary guy, like a spotter or what have you. But I think I mainly just, for lack of a better comparison, I think I was just more worried about just finding who did it. I was open to any possibility, but it just seemed like I just kept kind of being led astray with, okay, but you're kind of not leaving us with anything to think about. Like, I mean, you
Sure.
are, but you aren't. Like, we're kind of circling around here, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I guess I was open growing up to the multiple gunman theory, and then I think I just mainly was caught between, was JFK behind it, or was there a was it Oswald and who were his contractors?
Right.
How about yourself, Ryan?
Because I guess that's a big question, right? To piggyback off of that, it's
Too much.
if
There's
you
so
do
much to
buy
think.
into the if you do buy into well, I guess you have to buy into the fact that Oswald pulled the trigger, but like you said, who was pulling the strings behind Oswald? That might be
I
the
mean,
question. So I
another
guess it's
hitman killed said assassin, so
exactly, and
it
that's
was
where
more
I
than
was
one
going to
person.
go with it. Like it just seems so weird that like as soon as they're bringing Harvey Oswald, you know, through his perp walk or whatever, he's immediately killed. I mean, that just
Hmm.
seems way too convenient. What could he have known? And it just has such a mafia feel to it. So I don't I don't know. I guess I just have to say what I said. I think there's more to it than we know.
Yeah.
Oswald is a really confusing character to try and understand in any sense.
Hmm.
But I like to believe that, I mean, I know that our government is capable of doing horrible things, but I
Yeah.
like to believe that our own government wouldn't be responsible for taking out its chief executive,
Yeah.
especially one like Kennedy, who was trying to accomplish the things that he accomplished. But then that takes me down the rabbit hole of, well, he was trying to do things for the have-nots, and the
I
people in power don't always like that. So
guess.
it's
Yeah.
it's tricky. It can really make your mind play games.
It's kind
And
of
it
like
always
when
seems
you.
like there's something oddly sorry, like and like with both Kennedy assassinations, Bobby and JFK, it always seems like there's something convenient. It's like, oh, the car is gonna go and do this route for whatever reason that wasn't planned. And then for Bobby Kennedy, oh, let's just run you through the kitchen. We weren't planning on it, but we were going to run you through the kitchen so you can get to this press conference on time. And oh, Sirhan's there. It just always seems like there's something convenient that sets it up that wasn't in the plan. So
yeah, so
I don't know.
The one thing I was going to say is like there's a bunch of things that I find implausible about the idea of like a conspiracy in this situation. But to be honest, the one thing that I don't find super implausible is like the idea that some of those institutions in the 60s, those government institutions like the FBI, like the CIA, the fact that they would do something like this is it's not totally out of line with the stuff that they did at the time. Like they did a lot of crazy shit at the time. They were certainly willing to have other leaders of other countries killed. Obviously, the leader of their own government, that would be a whole nother thing. So I'm not necessarily saying it, but like it's not totally out of the question to me that they would do something that they were willing to wiretap their own citizens. They were willing to kill leaders of other countries. It's not totally out of the question to me. The one thing that I always find hard with a conspiracy is I feel like if you've ever actually tried to keep a secret on something, you find really quickly that the moment one person knows, suddenly everyone fucking knows, you know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
and like that's the only thing when we get to the level of like the government replanning the route on his car or whatever, that's when I'm kind of like, at that point you would probably need so many people involved that there's no way it wouldn't get out. Like there's no way that we wouldn't have more information that we do.
Or some other person who, again, was ratted out as the mole. I mean, I could even, now that you open up that rabbit hole, I could totally see that there was someone who decided to get rid of JFK because he either knew too much about how it operated or they felt like he wasn't going to go along with whatever the government's agenda was. I can totally see that. And then where it gets dangerous
LBJ
is
was more of a company man.
Yeah. All it takes, I could totally see a company donor who always had it out for him and said, that's it. He's not doing what we want to accomplish, so he's going to have to die.
Yeah, like that's kind of the situation that I could imagine, right? Like maybe somebody in the CIA who like doesn't like JFK for whatever reason. Like I could imagine that person on almost like an individual level or like a very small group of people being like, okay, we're going to get involved with a group of like criminals, like a group of small time criminals, and we're going to kind of egg them on to like kill Kennedy, right? Like that's the type of conspiracy that I could imagine happening, like something very small,
as opposed to, like you say, like CIA ordered this, or someone else had it out for him, and they decided to shut both him and anyone else who knew about it up.
Yeah, and the reason that I think that's super plausible is because there was a lot of this type of collusion between like the CIA and like smaller time criminals, like with the Castro situation. A lot of the times when they were trying to get people to execute Castro, they would work through the mob, like they would work through the mafia. And so I wouldn't be super surprised if they did that again, you know, and like try if they really wanted to get rid of Kennedy.
Anyone who knows about the CIA operation, but then that brings into mind like anyone else who might have known about it, including Nixon. You know, why was he, you know, allowed to cheat and do? I mean, both he and JFK were doing wiretapping, and it's like finally Nixon got caught, and it's like, well, they're all bad apples, so it does make you wonder, like, who are we more angry at, you know? For trusting and then being betrayed by.
Where I struggle though isn't there the expression the only way you can keep a secret is between two people is if one of them is dead? Like
yes.
I just don't know if I mean, I know the mob would always try to be smooth, you know, on the phone as opposed to criminals today, like taking a selfie after they rob a bank.
You
like
step down and
they'll like call the phone and be like, "Hey, you know, I need to talk to that guy about that thing." And I'd be like, "Okay, I know that he's like, you know, that they would have a code, but I just don't know if that many people would be able to keep a secret that big for that long."
Probably not.
Although then there's that other thing, right? That Joseph Goebbels said, the minister of propaganda. I think they even brought it up in the film that if you tell a lie that's big enough, eventually you can get people. I forget the full quote. Like
it seems like that's the one. that keeps being. Have you noticed that any of these kind of show up on some alt-right sites? And then it makes you wonder where they're going with it. Is like, do you guys actually want to solve this, or are you just adding to the clutter?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
But
definitely
I
this
know
is
the
a big
speech.
one
It's a
for
good speech, but it does make me wonder how sincere it is, or if it's
yeah, sure.
unintentional propaganda they're spreading.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but then I will say, as someone, you know, like Ryan knows this about me, but I can't meet knows, but my degree is in physics. So like I look at the magic bullet thing,
Yeah.
and I'm not, you know, I'm not an expert by any means. Like I just have a bachelor's degree in physics. And like the type of ballistics you would have to do to like actually understand that is like super, super complicated. And sometimes I do think when people talk about the magic bullet, it can be a little misleading because like bullets can bounce around in weird ways inside people's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing I find weird is like the movements that occur outside of the body. They don't really make sense to me, the way it like kind of curves outside of the body. That's what's super weird to me. And so the magic bullet thing, I don't know enough to be like an expert. And I tried to read, you know, one of the most reputable
Even the History
academic
Channel
sources.
doc
Like I tried to read one of the most yeah. I tried to read one of the most reputable academic sources in the world, Wikipedia, as we all know. I read a super, super long like article about it. I didn't get through the entire thing. But some of the movements do seem super weird to me. I'd be interested to know like what the argument for like why they happen that way is. But definitely like the three bullets thing is a little sketchy to me. Like I don't know how you actually account for all of the damage with just that many bullets.
To
I
build
will
on
give them
that, I think I mean, it's so cluttered that I think we'll eventually get a perpetrator, but I still don't think we'll I mean, but here's the catch-22. You know, like we finally found out who was responsible for the death of Biggie and Tupac, and the answer was staring at us right in the face. It was. Now I'm still not clear on who killed who. You know, one of them was a gangbanger who was asked by the vice cops, you know, to cut down on crime, we got to kill this so-called rap icon who we hate. And so, yeah, one of them went, shot at Tupac at the hotel where he was murdered, and then I think the Vice Squad, dressed up as mafioso, was who did a Scarface number on Biggie, and that was just sad because that had been opened before, but the LAPD had applied pressure and asked any article regarding that to be removed. The rumors persisted, and now here we are. We finally got someone to cough up some details, you know, one of the gangbangers related to the hitman. And it's just sad because it still was kind of underreported a bit. Obviously, places like Vibe magazine and other places were going to town reporting it, but I was just kind of disillusioned. It's like, see, we finally found out one of the biggest mysteries, and yet no one really people still don't really want to talk about it, which makes me a
was
little
it
more
Shook? Was it Shook Knight? Was that like the guy who was like super involved in that? I'm trying to remember. I used to know a lot about this, but I don't anymore.
He was kind of used as like the fall guy at first, I think, and then
okay,
there was like once again, you know, it's another clutter, you know.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in high school, I believed that I was like totally on board with the thing. Like Shook Knight definitely like orchestrated this. Like it was all him. Like that was
I thought so too. Yeah, I thought
was my
okay,
thing.
it makes sense. And then
maybe I'm wrong though.
yeah, it's like they basically updated it now, and still it's perplexing because it's just like, why did I mean? So to answer your question, it seems like if like we are concerned, if it does involve one of the biggest governmental powers, then they've probably done enough damage. They made it to where all we can do is theorize.
But can I throw something else out there?
Please, anytime.
There's like so much room for it to go wrong, though. And when you think about what's going on in the world, I mean, we're recovering from the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the relations between the Soviet Union and the United States at the time were abysmal. There, you know, we're in the midst of a Cold War. You know, escalation is ramping up in various fronts overseas. Why, like, I almost wondered, like, why would you risk destabilizing the government to such an extent by taking them? Like what? I don't like. I wonder what that cost benefit analysis was if we are going down the road of it was people in the government. I mean, did they just know that LBJ was going to just step in and it was going to be super clean? Is that what they expected? But I mean, that just seems like such a monumental risk.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was thinking too, is like, I don't know how you could know that replacing LBJ with JFK would give you different outcomes on any of these things, right? Like, so we're assuming it's like,
is it really what you want, or is it what he wants? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not actually like, obviously it turned out that JFK died, LBJ replaced him, and LBJ went really hard at like Vietnam, but it's not clear to me that you would know that before LBJ actually did all those things.
That is true. That I'm glad you actually bring that up, because a lot of people like to kind of just go with just LBJ had an agenda and everything, but we don't really like to think about what was JFK planning or being briefed on at that moment, at that place, at that month before he was assassinated. Because it seems like everyone likes to focus on just the after and everything. I've always wondered that myself. Like, what was their final conversation like? What was, because it was pretty clear he had something that some other power was not crazy about his doing. And we do know that, again, LBJ, like all these guys, was very power hungry, wanted to be president, but at the same time, it does, like you say, it makes you wonder why resort to murder at a big time of potential war and destabilizing Cuba with the CIA's, but at the same time, I think that's why the CIA rumor persists, because it seems like they are pretty much in control of everything at all time. I mean, look at other stuff like Alex Winter and other people who have, fled. It makes you wonder if maybe, sorry, I don't mean to be venting, but it's that is kind of the biggest plot hole, the biggest dent, it's like, because I mean, there was plenty of other tragedies involving JFK, even, the many people who he had affairs with.
True. Maybe it was just a crazy ex who plotted the whole thing.
Damn you, Marilyn.
Yeah, there you go. Arthur Miller wasn't so happy about him cheating on Marilyn, said, I'll show you. I'll show you something.
We'll return after these messages.
Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by four aging millennials and our outdated opinions. Join us every Tuesday as we discuss movies, TV, games, and even music, new and old.
Dude, what do you think you're doing?
Are you seriously trying to record a promo without us right now?
Well, yeah?
Dude, you can't just do the promo by yourself. Who's gonna listen to that?
Yeah, and you probably haven't even told them that we're a pop culture podcast where we always agree on everything. For instance, the Sam Raimi trilogy, easily being the best of the Spider-Man movies.
No. But I think we can all agree that Jaws is a classical masterpiece.
Nope, don't like that. But we do all agree that the sequel trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the Skywalker saga, right, guys?
That comment is so ridiculous. I don't even know where to
Anyways, that'll do it from all of us here at Culture Shock. Thanks for listening.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
Run all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
I'll take your name, bitch.
That's my new favorite conspiracy theory for JFK. That's it.
Arthur Miller. Wow.
Arthur Miller did it to get back at him for sleeping with Marilyn.
Death of a Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why there's that punk rock band, the Dead Kennedys. But yeah, pretty depressing how. But I mean, it is interesting how the 90s you were able to come up with these movies that years ago would have never been made. They would have been, drive-in theater crap, direct-to-video movies.
Yeah, that was the one thing about this film. Like, the first time I sat down to watch it, I literally had to like quit. I was like a little drunk, and I was just like, I can't follow this shit. It's such a dense movie. I really think he almost was like trying to make a documentary. But like, yeah, it's like super, super dense. And I almost commend him for like putting together all this information that he wanted to convey into like a narrative that's kind of compelling with like interesting characters and that sort of thing. Like, I actually thought on that front, it was like pretty good.
Yeah. I do think the actors disappearing in the role, most of them are very unrecognizable. Even Joe Pesci. I mean,
took me a while to realize it's Joe Pesci. Yeah.
Oh, it took me a while. As soon as I saw him, I was like, "Oh yes!" I did not realize he's in this. Yes,
Scorsese and Lethal Weapon, and here he's actually very calm. I don't want to die. I want to die.
Yeah, I think that was why I didn't recognize him, because he wasn't screaming. I think that was it.
He wasn't heckling people.
He was screaming in that one part, though.
Yeah, that's true.
When he thought he was going to get whacked, and then he did. I guess.
I think the History Channel
quotation marks he did.
The History Channel edit was a little confusing. They kind of cut out most of his death. They just flashed forward to just the dead body. I was like, did I miss something? I went out for a second. I was wondering what I missed.
So maybe the History Channel's involved in this whole thing too.
Well, it is co-owned by Disney, so there you go.
Let's go straight to the top.
What's funny is I was looking at trivia for Nixon, and apparently, that was produced for Hollywood Pictures, and one of the vice presidents of the Disney company was very disillusioned and apologized to the Nixon family for the movie. So I wouldn't be surprised if part of the clutter was just getting any of these movies made. And I can you imagine what the boardroom meetings must have been like? It's, we're gonna cancel. We're gonna get blacklisted in Hollywood. Yeah.
But I think if anybody's going to make the movie, it's Oliver Stone. I mean, people want to hear his perspective
kind of part
on
of his
things.
signature.
They know he puts the work in.
Yeah.
He has a personal connection to it from fighting in Vietnam and living through JFK's presidency.
I mean, who else is going to?
I gotta respect it. And 3 hours long. I mean, definitely put the research in. The cast was dynamite. I mean, I don't really. It's an awesome movie. I thought really well acted. I mean, I don't know if I'm interested enough to look into this Jim Garrison guy, but I loved watching a movie about him and his whole team around him. I thought it was interesting that, what's his name, Merle, the scary guy from The Walking Dead, is in it as a young man. And I'm like, oh, I'm terrified of him in The Walking Dead.
That was another one that took me a while to figure out, but yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the voice actor for the pig from Toy Story, and the guy, he's in Jurassic Park as well, the guy who
wait, Knight.
Wait, which guy was that?
Yeah.
Wait, Knight, Newman from Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah. I remembered seeing Newman. Yeah. I don't know if I knew that Newman voiced all those people. I didn't know that.
I thought that was John Ratzenberger from.
Yeah, but
did I mess it up?
No, it's all good. There's similar comedians making fun of the
but Newman, Newman was in there, which is hilarious.
Yeah. If they brought Kramer in there too for any kind of role, that would have been hilarious.
Too soon.
Could we just like comment on something that, like, I don't know what it is about movies from that era, but why, like, and I think maybe it's something that we should use in this era, but they're sweaty all the time. And I get it, it's New Orleans, but they're sweaty so much. And I think in movies this day and age, like even in places where it's hot, it's like, but we got to have them made up. We got to have them pristine. We got to have Brad Pitt looking like Brad Pitt. Whereas in this, it was like everybody's sweating and yelling, and there's paper everywhere, and like everybody's puffing on a cigar, stuff like that. I really kind of liked that about it.
Yeah, and it definitely, because it seems like, yeah, post CSI, everything has to look sexy, even if it isn't.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is like, hey, but if you want realism, you gotta show. I mean, sweat can be used cinematically. It's very cinematic, and it's something else besides just trying to, just make it exciting. You can also do it just to just echo a mood.
Yeah, like I wonder in this day and age, I mean, if they would have gotten away with the wig that Tommy Lee Jones wore. Everybody's got to look good. I mean, that wig today would be a crime on television.
Yeah, which in fairness, maybe they shouldn't have gotten away with it.
He looked fucking awful without it. Like, he looked even worse than Joe Pesci. Like, with that curly, like,
no one
white
seems
hair.
to tell him no.
Tommy Lee Jones, huh? Jesus. I do think the movie, going off of that and bringing Kevin Bacon into it as well, I do think that this would be a tough movie to watch if I was a member of the LGBTQ community. I don't necessarily think it portrayed gay people well at all, and I think it actually was quite offensive in certain ways.
There's a lot of 90s movies where I just cringe, and I'll look at it and I'll go, someone thought that was funny. And I was probably one of the many people laughing at it back then, and which disturbs me because I like to think I was going along with it. But yeah, it's Oliver Stone is definitely a boomer when it comes to portraying stereotypes like that. It's just very obnoxious and in everyone's face, and it makes you wonder, okay, are you doing a stereotype, or are you just adding to the problem?
Yeah, and then as far as Shaw, the character that Tommy Lee Jones was playing, one of the things that in the minimal research I did into Garrison and his whole case against the government, against Shaw and all that stuff, watching the court scene, you're like, okay, yes, like, okay, like I see all of your charts, I hear all of the things that you're saying. How are you connecting any of this to this dude? Like, it seems like they brought Shaw into the courtroom as an excuse for Garrison just to demagogue about all of his JFK conspiracies. Like, I almost found myself feeling a little bit bad for Shaw, even though they proved later that he was involved in the CIA and had some connection to something that wasn't exactly great.
Yeah, that never sat well with me because it felt like it was echoing. It almost felt like a studio note at times, even like it's got to look like A Time to Kill or Presumed Innocent, one of those 90s thrillers back then, and then we got to bring in the John Grisham crowd. It's like,
I mean, I wasn't even like going that deep. I was just thinking in terms of like the case itself. Like,
well, exactly.
It couldn't have seemed less about Shaw. Like,
it definitely feels like,
it discombobulates the whole case to where you're like, wait. So what was the story behind that part? I want to know a little more about that. Instead, it kind of just threw it in my face. I only caught less than 2% of this whole thing, and so kudos to the filmmakers for making it look cinematic, but a strike against them. They're in contempt. I'm gonna definitely say
it's definitely one of those cases. It's definitely one of those cases where they definitely did not consult a real lawyer.
No,
because I feel like you would never get away with that shit in a real courtroom where you like go off on all these speeches about like what America really means, and like you do all this stuff, and like he almost like never connects it back to like Shaw actually, which is kind of funny.
But it was a real case. Like I wonder how much they went off of. I mean, there's transcripts. Every word is recorded, so I wonder how much they stuck to the literal script and how much they scripted. So I'd be interested to know. But yeah, I mean, I'm just imagining myself as a juror just sitting there after Kevin Costner just goes and goes, and I mean, phenomenal acting by him, by the way, in that scene. But when he gets to the end of it, just thinking as a juror, okay, like, but what? Like, okay, that's your case, but like, what? Like, what's innocent? What am I proving is innocent and guilty? What? America? Like, what's going on? The CIA, Shaw? Like what the
shit,
hell?
am I ruling on the bullet or what?
Yeah.
I don't know if the bullet's magic. I'm not sure.
Because his haircut, I mean, I definitely have problems with his haircut. Guilty for the barber, for Tommy Lee Jones's barber, guilty. But like, I don't, what the hell else? So I wonder how long it took them in real life to figure out like that case.
Yeah, it unfortunately opens up more questions and answers nada. But at the same time, it is, I mean, I kind of see why they did it. However, it does kind of make you wonder, is like, was this a studio note, or did he want to detail this better, ran out of time, and then said, let's just cut through it, make it more of a transition? There's just no telling with Oliver. It seems like even his commentary tracks, he kind of just sticks to mainly just talking about who he's worked with and consulted versus what his inspiration was. So adding to the clutter, unfortunately, is kind of Oliver Stone. He is both making this fascinating and making you want to seek it out, and it is kind of part of his signature style. It's just, I mean, kind of going back to what you guys were saying earlier, it's an imperfect, it's a watchable yet uneven kind of movie. It's just kind of a bit of everything.
Yeah, and I mean, on some level, if you made it look like a real courtroom, probably wouldn't be super interesting to watch, you know? So I get it. Like, I get why he took that. And to what you were saying, Ryan, I don't really know what the transcripts of this look like. I know he based it off of that Jim Garrison guy's book, mostly, I think. So I think it would probably, he'd probably have some details in there. But I would definitely understand taking some liberties, right? Because like, you don't want to have to like go through all of the motions of like the court and like all that boring shit. Like, you want to make it exciting, and so throwing in like a big exciting speech about whatever is
But I would disagree. I would disagree that that was a boring case that they had to jazz up. People were thrilled about that. I mean, he was getting national headlines. He was getting all these phone calls at home, and people were like trying to like prey on his kid, like with like death threats and crazy stuff like that. Like, what's not exciting about that court case? I mean, I would say that that's probably one of the cases of definitely that decade, maybe the century. I mean,
if that's the case.
This guy is trying to prove that there was a conspiracy within the top levels of our government to assassinate our president. Like, there's nothing more exciting and gripping than that case. Although, what I wanted to add was, when it comes to Oliver Stone, he kind of falls into that Quentin Tarantino type of Scorsese camp, where it's like, all right, if you make it 4 hours, I'm watching 4 hours. If you make it 8, I'm watching 8. If you make it 9, we'll see, but probably. But I think that I would have been happy. I was almost expecting the movie to end when Kevin Costner finished making his case. How do you guys feel about the movie continuing on for longer than that? I thought that would have been a nice spot for it to end, and it didn't. It kept going. Because like, it was nice. Like, his kid finally came to see what his dad was doing, and all this time, the wife was like, all right, I'm going to support you because you're onto something. I thought that was the perfect culmination of everything, ideologically, from the character's point of view, and then the movie kept going after the courtroom.
Yeah, I was kind of, I saw it on TV, so I didn't notice it initially, but I think in retrospect, when I would re-see scenes from it, it would make me wonder, is like, I gotta watch this in 2 days. I can't do this in one sitting. I don't know how anyone saw it other than
I did it in 2.
It seems like the 90s still occasionally would have a movie that felt borderline like a 70s film, where it's like, you're going and going, you got to cut this off at some point.
Yeah.
It's a lot to consider, and like you say, even just looking at the director's cut moments, like, because they're key yet so long, to just go through either one will just drive you crazy. So you got to watch them in segments, but it also, like you say, it does feel like it kind of could have taken off from there, or it might have worked better as a mini series, I guess.
And I'm somebody, I love what I love, but I also don't think that the things that I love need to go on forever. Like, I'm happy with them ending. all this thing. When you and I were talking, Cam, before we got on the mics about Harry Potter a little bit, Kevin, we had compared you to Rupert Grint. Cam said
I've
you
heard
were
that one.
lookalike.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Which
I've had all kinds of comparisons.
Now I totally see it. And
Yeah.
Ron Weasley's the GOAT. But with that being said, Harry Potter, book 7, over, done. I don't need things that I like to keep coming back. Like they're bringing the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers back. God help me, So I definitely am an advocate of the things that I love, knowing when to end. That's what makes Breaking Bad so good. And that was one of the only things that I think this movie had going against it.
Outlining
didn't
it from the
seem
beginning.
to know when to end, type of thing.
It definitely got to that point where it just felt like, hey, I don't think anyone told him no after a while, and they kind of should have.
Yeah, and I don't know how you tell a guy like Oliver Stone no. So
I
people
think
credit,
that's
maybe
just
people
it.
tried, maybe so.
You either stop the funds from going through or something, but I think that's what they're afraid of too. Is Spike or anyone else might pull a, hey, I'm taking off, because they'll totally do something without their agent's permission. They are those kinds of guys. So it does make you wonder, what happened.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we should shorten this. Okay. Well, I'm Oliver Stone. All right, never mind. Good talk.
Absolutely. It's so much to consider, and it's also I'm afraid to even kind of just flirt with even this part of film history. I'm afraid that someone else might have made an even worse movie.
Oh, about the JFK assassination?
Yeah, had I changed anything, because I think that's just it too. It seems like anyone else they might have gotten might have just not cut the mustard, or might have become a producer's bitch and said, hey, I'm gonna glamorize everything and not get a single thing right.
Yeah, and this could just be me, but I feel like there are some people who are like so unhinged about the JFK conspiracy theory shit. Like I'm sure there are like documentaries out there that people have made that are like endless and like just tons of information, and they're just like talking to you about how, obviously in the Zapruder film you can see that like this happened and this happened. So yeah,
man.
and I do think like, obviously it was quite long, and I definitely I think I did it in like 3 sittings total. So I was like, yeah, I couldn't handle the whole thing at once, but I do think that parts of it, I think that it was like I definitely think the courtroom scene, even though I was kind of like at that point I was kind of like, oh my god, I'm just so done. I did think it was like compelling and engaging, and yeah, I mean, I guess it's like hard. It's hard for me to see how he could have told the story in like a shorter amount of time. It was just like a lot to say.
He is kind of like some of the Law and Order guys, where sometimes he will let them kind of chew the scenery a bit and takes you a little out of the moment, even though it is a good performance. They're getting a little too cute for their own good. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he did decide to push back a bit, and then the actors were so passionate about bringing this important tell at the time to life that they decided, yeah, sure, I'll chew it up, I'll rip it apart. And it's like, well, you don't have to go in there just yet. Yeah. It's a lot to consume, and it's a lot to consider, and even just getting a solid take on it is also a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It
was definitely good workout for your brain, though. With each person you would talk to, and then they would give you like this kernel, and then they would build on it and build on it and build on it, and you would have to follow every single piece in order to understand the full thing. And if there was one piece that you didn't understand or that you missed, you wouldn't understand shit. You'd have to just, all right, I gotta back it up. Like I had to do that once when he was talking to that government guy on the park bench with, I think, the Washington Monument in the background. It's like, all right, back it up. I heard Black Ops, and I think I missed something. So
yeah, I totally forgot about that scene, but that one was a little bit weird to me. I have to wonder, because
that was my favorite scene.
Yeah, I tried to read about Jim Garrison a bit while I was like watching the film. And one of the things he gets accused of
Mr. Garrison. Oh, not that.
Okay. different one.
Okay.
Definitely a different one.
Okay. Just lighting the mood. Sorry, I just derailed it.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, it's Miss Garrison, right? Not Mr. But one of the things he gets accused of is like being a little bit too credulous with his guests, with his what's the word for it? His witnesses being like a little bit too credulous of like what they say, and like not being skeptical enough about like maybe the motivations they might have for like saying certain things. And I did kind of wonder about that. Like, how much vetting did he do of this guy who claimed to have worked for the CIA? Like, how does he know for sure that Mr. X had any involvement with anything, or how does he know he wasn't just like an insane guy? And I didn't read, Jim Garrison's book, so I have no idea. Like, it could have been like a really like he actually knows for sure that this is a guy from the CIA. But like when I kind of saw that, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this was just some dude who was a psycho who just fucked with Jim Garrison. I have no idea.
Yeah. And this is where the line especially grays when you're having to kind of, it's like you, the filmmaker, still have a responsibility to do as much research as you can. And I think this is where, I mean, given how Oliver Stone has a bad habit of wanting to do giant sit downs with various dictators, it's like you don't know how much of that is him just saying I'll do it just because I can versus I actually want to know the truth. It's a little bit of both, I guess, but it's bizarre because it makes you wonder if he's actually going all the way or if he's just letting him blab and he's just writing down the parts that are interesting. He's like, no, hold up. Why don't we fact check it all before we print that instead of, and I think this is where it is. He wants to just hear it all instead of just modify it and edit through and get the best parts. But at the same time, you still kind of owe it to yourself to kind of just do a little fact checking, see if they're full of it or not. And I think like William Friedkin, he will often just listen to everybody and he'll be so sold on him. He's just like, I don't care if it's true or not. I'm going to listen to it. It's like, well, I think you should worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, from Oliver Stone's perspective, like my assumption is that this is really something that Jim Garrison said he did, right? Like my assumption is that Jim Garrison really did speak to a guy. And so maybe from Oliver Stone's perspective, like there's an argument that like, yeah, you just throw it in there. But I do, it was something that I wondered about when I was watching it. I was like, how reliable is Mr. X?
I gotta say though, for Mr. X, I mean, the guy who played him, first of all, was amazing in making everything he said believable. And if it wasn't a film that I knew had some baggage as far as JFK conspiracy theories, I would have completely believed him. Like if it was a fiction movie, I would have been like, oh, well, that's the guy, of course. And everything that he said is right. We cracked the case. We figured it out. But on the same token with Jim Garrison, it's like, how many other sources that were that high up or that claimed to be that high up did he have? It did almost seem like in some ways he was, at least in the way he was depicted in the film, grasping at straws in a way. And I will say that I do believe with 100% certainty that Jim Garrison believed everything that he said with 100% certainty.
What's your take on John Candy's portrayal of Dean Andrews? It seems like this is probably one of the big highlights of the movie where people will note that they're really intrigued by this portrayal of another, serious role by a comedic actor.
Oh, I don't think I know Dean Andrews. Who
he was the one who was doing a testimony representing Oswald.
Shoot, yeah, I think you got us both with somebody that we're not super familiar with.
I don't know.
Definitely should be.
But yeah, it was the comedian John Candy. He was playing him there in the court scene, but it's all good. I think this
listeners
also
are going to be like, these two are idiots.
John Candy.
Yes.
Did you say? I thought you said John Kennedy, and so you were like, I thought you were saying like Dean Andrews was a guy playing John Kennedy.
I'm sorry.
I was like, I don't really think they depicted John Kennedy that much outside of like films. But,
yeah, no, not in this movie. John Candy's portrayal of Dean Andrews, the lawyer representing Oswald.
I totally did not
recognize
John Candy being in there.
And that's kind of why I knew he was in it. And he was like, again, most people forget he's in it because he's so unrecognizable kind of. But then so kudos to a filmmaker for making a comedic actor be unrecognizable in a dramatic role. But at the same time, like, I don't know that, like, to your earlier point, that everyone portrays everyone necessarily like they would have been portrayed at that time. I'm sure everyone got too cute for their own good, and at the same time, I'm sure they meant well, but at the same time, did they do well? That's the ultimate question, because like I'm looking even at the other cast, and I don't even know that Frank Wally's character. I know he's in a few Stone movies. I don't know that him being as the imposter who mistaken for Oswald helped the movie at all. I think that just adds more fuel to the fire of conspiracies.
One
Unless
thing
that was a real person, but see, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that a real person? I don't know.
One thing I wanted to bring up that my girlfriend actually told me this morning that was totally new to me, and maybe you guys know this, but in a lot of the like JFK conspiracy like circles, one of the people that will often get pointed to as potentially having conspired with whoever killed JFK, like is Woody Harrelson's dad, apparently.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys know about this, but apparently Woody Harrelson's dad was a hitman.
What?
And yeah, I read about this, and at one point he I think he was actually responsible for killing some judge. And then at one point when he was like cornered by police or something, he like shouted out that he killed this judge and also JFK. And
well,
he
when you're
claimed
cornered,
later,
though, I mean,
yeah, he claimed later that he
He'll
was
say all
just
kinds of
saying
shit.
stuff. Yeah, he was just saying stuff while he was cornered. But a bunch of people are will like point to that and be like, well, he said he killed John F. Kennedy. Like, that's kind of weird. So yeah, an interesting little thing that I didn't know until this morning.
Yeah, I've always felt sorry for that actor. It's just, I can't imagine, you know.
That's a weird kind of baggage to carry around with you.
Yeah, being raised by a hitman.
I seem to recall that he would visit him every once in a while in prison until the day he died, and just he would keep asking him, seriously, why?
Like, why John F. Kennedy? I would understand LBJ, but I'm kidding. Maybe a bad thing to joke about, but
we just got canceled. Anyway, yeah, I know what you mean. Oh man, and kind of exhausting if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. And we haven't even scratched the surface. Like, that's the thing, too.
How can we?
Like, feeling tired. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you all, gents, for being on here. Where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find us on Spotify. Our podcast is called The Almost President's Podcast. If you didn't hear that at the beginning, we talk about history and politics through the lens of the loser. So far as I know, everybody else tells history through the lens of the winner. So, and then we're also on Twitter and Instagram at The Almost President's Podcast. We're pretty active in both of those places. We have I have a lot of obnoxious, horrible takes on Twitter, and you know, we do a good job running our Instagram as well. So yeah, a lot of places to find us there. So
nice.
Yeah, and you can check us out wherever you find podcasts. Yeah, in addition to Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, a lot of ones that I think Google has podcasts. We're on there. At least the analytics say we are, and that people listen to us from there. And currently, if you're interested, we are keeping up with the 2024 presidential election. We're following it through the GOP nominee.
It can't be just the Young Turks to do it. We need someone else to keep track of it.
Soon to be nominee, potentially. Yeah, so we're doing a series on DeSantis. So if you are looking to listen to something heinous and evil, we'll do our best to kind of parse through that as headlines develop. So that's kind of our current project.
I look forward to it.
And then our second season about a past almost president is going to launch in June. So,
which is probably wise, because we got to wait for all those January 6th pricks to get arrested, you know.
Yeah, who knows how long that'll take.
Yeah, we're still waiting for the head prick to get arrested, so I don't know if that'll happen.
That's true too, though. I did lose some serious faith in the FBI when they were spending more times trying to look diverse and asking for help. It's like, if anyone knows who those are, they're not going to help you. You're going to have to arrest them.
All right.
Well, anyway, thank you all so very much for stopping by here. It was really a blessing in disguise, and I'm glad you suggested this topic. I was down to get it. And, you know, we didn't really talk too much about any of the other presidential movies because, truth be told, they're not all that interesting. This one is the most interesting out of all those three. You know?
Yeah, agreed.
Long story short, you know, this movie with what it doesn't do well, still does intrigue a bit. And as overlong as we mentioned it was, you can still show it in a history class. But if you're going to do that, you might want to have a moderator or someone saying, what's your take on this? Challenge the students. Don't just blindly put it in front of them. And, you know, Nixon's kind of is all about Stone kind of experimenting with acting, and W is kind of more, I don't know what the point of that movie was, actually. This one, you know the point, but it could have easily backfired even worse. And so it's kind of a decent but imperfect movie. So, thank you all for being here. It was really a blessing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us on, Cam.
Keep updating all the dum-dums out there and let them know there's danger in this world.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, before we signed off, do we want to rate this out of 10 or something like that? See if we can kind of give
sure.
people... I don't know if people...
I'll make it easier for you.
It was my
5 stars. Out of 5 stars, what are we going to rate this one?
Okay, out of 5 stars.
All right, out of 5. First?
Kevin can go first.
All right, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I was going to give it... I was going to say 3.5, maybe. Like, I almost want to go 4. Like, I think I've said everything that I was going to say, like, or that I wanted to say about this.
Yeah.
But basically it's, you know, I think that it does do a really good job of packing a bunch of stuff in and still being interesting. And I think that it's like commendable for that, but it is still like super long and very dense. So it can be a little, then that's why it took me like 3 watches. So yeah, that's kind of my view, but I don't know if Ryan or Kim, you guys want to go next?
It's funny you were going to say I was going to give it exactly the same, a 3.5. Although I guess I'll rate it like this. So for a movie, I'll give it a 3.5. For an Oliver Stone movie, though, I'll give it a 4 out of 5 because I watched Alexander, and that was so horrible and scarring of an experience for a director that I respect. So that'll bump me up 0.5 as far as Oliver Stone movies go. So 4 out of 5 for an Oliver Stone flick, 3.5 for just film in general will be my take.
Yeah, I'm kind of with most of what you say. I do feel like this is a highlight of his resume, and at the same time, while it may not have dated as well, or if it was ever going to date well, yeah, I too have encountered all 3 versions of Alexander, and don't let anyone fool you. There's no saving that movie. That movie is trash with a capital T, but this one is not trash. Yeah. I would give it a 3.5 out of 5. Normally I give a 3 out of 5 if it's a movie I think is competently made and worth a watch, but don't really personally connect to, was overrated by the Oscar bait. But in this case, it is a competently made movie and it is accessible. It's just a little concerning that just nowadays, kind of like how people are deliberately misinterpreting movies like Fight Club or The Matrix and doing it the polar opposite of what it actually represents, is like, I'm a little worried about how this movie might be weaponized, so to speak, or used by conspiracy theorists. But at the same time, it is very engaging, but at the same time, again, it's still a little overlong nowadays, but with today's standards. So yeah, if anyone's going to watch it or give it a rent, if you see it on one of the movie channels, record it and just make time for 2 different nights to see it, or don't.
Absolutely.
And take our word for it. But thank you all for being on here, and I look forward to the coverage of Everything Wrong with Society. But yeah, I did see that you had a DeSantis episode, and I will be sure to listen to that first one. So.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks again for having us on. It was a great time.
Godspeed. I'm glad you, and we'll come back anytime.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up